Everybody, welcome back to a new episode of the Phantom Zone. I know it's a long time coming for you two people and maybe the few river newts that live somewhere in Japan that listen to the show. I am your host, Eric Fedorchak, here to talk to you about a myriad of subjects, and I'm sure for Lou and Arlen to go off into the weeds. Speaking of those two, who else is here with me?
I am present and accounted for the moment. We'll see. We'll see how it goes.
Nice of you to join us, Izza.
Oh, see, I was going to say I'm Lou Gonzalez. I'm your colored commentary.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. Well, I mean,
yeah.
You saw the topics. You're the only reason you're on tonight is for one reason, Lou. So yeah, I guess before we get into anything, what has everybody been watching and playing?
I'll start off. We were doing like a little bit of pre-show talk, but this is good for the show actually. And I was saying, I have a hard time with comedies, and what we're watching needs to be as black as my soul. Which is why I come to you with a recommendation for a comedy series on Amazon. Have any of you seen even like trailers, promotion for the show called Class of 07?
I saw something about it, but I have no idea. I just saw because that's close. I guess, I don't know, targeted ads. That's close enough to my graduation year that it targeted me.
That makes sense.
I would have been 29, so no, I don't care about the Class of 07. God kill me.
It has very it has very little to do with that and a lot to do with that. It is a Australian comedy series set, I believe it's set in 2017. If that's the idea of a 10-year anniversary and such. And it's, as is going around these days, it is a show about an apocalypse, but it's very much, the apocalypse is not central. It's not about it's not like watching like cities like get destroyed or anything. It's a group of girls who all come back to their private school for their graduation, and one of them, who is sort of the last one there, she starts going there because water is coming out of the ground. Weird, just jet streams and stuff, is weird seismic activity, because the world is literally flooding. And her private school was up on a mountain, so she goes there to warn everybody, and she gets stranded in her private school on top of the mountain. And this is a comedy once again. And it's a laugh ride. It's a real situational comedy. Very it's like the inverse of Yellow Jackets in a lot of ways. It's hitting on a lot of the same very similar themes and concepts. But I ate it up. I watched the whole show, I think, in the course of maybe 2 weeks, because I was trying to spread it out. And I rather enjoyed it. It's a cast of Australian actresses who most of us don't really know, and then Emily Browning, who I think is maybe the person who's most recognizable. In the cast.
Naked a lot in American Gods.
That is her role in the world, to be naked quite a bit, which is weird for me as a person who grew up on the original series of Unfortunate Events. Very strange that's what the rest of her career is, essentially.
She's also the star of that rape movie that Zack Snyder did, Sucker Punch.
Yeah, she's Baby Doll.
Yes. A complicated film, to say the least.
No, it's bad. That's all you need to say about it. It's bad.
No, it is bad. No, Eric, I'm not saying it's not bad. I'm just saying I understand that there is a significant proportion of like cosplayers who, for some reason, no, not for some reason, I know why, who are like, this is an important movie for me, and while I don't understand it,
it's important that for their revenue.
Yes.
No, yes, but also like there are some of them. You watch like videos of like people being interviewed about cosplaying as the characters from the movie, and when they talk about Sucker Punch, it's the same thing I have currently with the Justice League lovers out there, where I don't know what movie that they watched. The movie that they saw is not the movie that I saw in the theater that I paid my money for, that I spent my hard-earned quarters to see. And I'm like, I don't understand what they're talking about. They exist in another universe. Anyway, we're not talking about Sucker Punch. But yeah, like she's very good in it. She has great comedic timing and all that stuff. But the show, like, it gets to something darker about female relationships that I can't really judge. But from my perspective, seemed very real to me. And I found it rather delightful. The entire cast is great. It's got the girl from the very beginning of Smile as one of the main characters. She's kind of like a girl boss CEO type, and she's amazing in it. The entire cast is just like characters who are very interesting. None of them are like the good person. They're all kind of different shades of like complicated, interesting, broken people who are like dealing with this really big existential situation the best that they can. And the show can go back and forth tonally in really interesting ways, which is why I say it's a good pairing for Yellow Jackets, because that also does that quite a bit. And it's just masterful. I really hope Amazon does another one. I can't make heads or tails of how Amazon keeps shows or doesn't. I can't say if they will.
I feel like the entire streaming part is just a tax write-off.
Yeah.
Especially now you did not actually buy a football team, so...
Well, that and Bezos has enough money to just throw at stuff and be like, yeah, I like this. Let's do this again. Like, so it's, yeah, I think you're 100% correct with that, Lou. Is like, smaller people are getting stuff just because Bezos needs a tax write-off. So.
Yeah, I think that's the same for Apple, too.
But Apple I feel like their moves are... Well, that and Apple, I feel like their moves are more... they're planned out a lot more. There's more of a like, hey, no, we want to go for prestige here. So
I was gonna say, like, I think Apple's going after HBO.
Oh yeah,
and Amazon is just flinging shit at the wall.
HBO is turning themselves not HBO very quickly. So you know,
I'm sorry, not HBO, Max.
Yes. Well, well, it's interesting because that was the direction. Like the previous administration was very much pushing HBO to become a different thing, and then Zaslav comes in and he's like, "I don't like the thing you were turning HBO into, but I'm going to turn it into something else too, that I think is somehow better."
We're going to do castle renovations,
right? It is very odd. And then meanwhile, all the former HBO people get hired by Apple. And from everything I understand, Apple is just letting them do their thing. They're just like, yeah, you just do it.
Oh, kind of like what HBO used to do years ago.
Yeah.
Okay, got it.
Just make good shows. We're going to leave you alone.
Yeah.
Now, and that's inverse of, accounts coming out of Amazon are apparently that Amazon was started with that intention. But what keeps on happening is the Amazon statistics people, the people who look at the money and the numbers and they manage all that, they keep coming in and like undoing major decisions made by the head of Prime Video.
There's an SAT question for you. So like Amazon is to Netflix as Apple is to HBO?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
I mean, it's the same.
That's what it sounds
problem.
like. Yeah,
it's the same problem. It just happens at different places in the in the pipeline. It happens earlier. Like Amazon tries to make a thing or they try to produce a thing, and before the thing even comes out, a money person is like, "Oh, that doesn't match our analytics. That won't allow us to sell Tostitos on through your TV remote."
It's like, guys, cool your jets. Like, worry about like you guys going to like the Supreme Court for your anti union shit.
And then on the other side, you have Netflix, where it's like after the show's out, after it's had 3 seasons that people like, and people are like, "Oh, I'm down for another 3 seasons." Netflix is like, our analytics say otherwise. Our analytics say that you will stop watching. No, I'm telling you, I'm going to keep watching it. No, our numbers disagree, so we're just going to cancel it.
And Hulu is just off to the side saying, "I'm with Disney," and that's all they have to say.
Well,
barely kind of exist at this point, I feel like.
Well, Hulu's interesting because what's left out of that conversation is Hulu is still technically half Universal. It is.
Oh, I didn't know
I thought they bought that out.
So they're going to have to very soon. There's essentially a contract that's going to expire, and Disney and Universal are going to have to decide who's going to buy the other one out and whether they want to buy the other one out. And I have a feeling it's probably going to go to Universal, and Disney Plus is just going to open up more.
I don't see any reason why Disney would want it. Like, just move all that shit over to Disney Plus.
Oh,
yeah,
Disney has a
Plus.
Disney has a majority stake in it. They're majority owned. Yeah,
but it's like 51%, 49% thing. It's
like it was like a weird split between all the networks, and then when they bought Fox, they became the majority holder.
Yes, and it's my understanding, at least, is it became like we have to have a somewhat equal share or something like that. But it is mostly Disney already. The question is, will it remain mostly Disney?
Disney owns a 60% stock in it or stake in it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's right. Because it was originally 30, I think, or something like that.
But it seems weird for Disney to have a competing streaming service. Like, I know they do their bundle.
They do.
But, like, you get Disney Plus and then you get Hulu with commercials.
Also, it makes more sense for Universal to buy it because, like,
it was Comcast who co-owned it, and they
they started their own thing now too.
They had agreed to cede its control of Disney. An agreement had reached, and they have until as early as 2024 to buy that other 33% back. Yeah. So it's going to be Disney. Disney's going to own it.
They could.
They've already put too much into it.
I don't know though, because they can take all their stuff off.
The one thing that it has is like the live aspect, which I don't know how many people subscribe to, but like that's unless they shove that feature into Disney Plus, which would be weird.
Yeah,
I don't know.
It seems like that's.
Yeah, I don't know. I could see Hulu getting like divided up quite a bit because I don't know how much Disney wants to be a cable service. If Disney wanted to be a cable service, they could have bought Comcast 20 years ago, or they could have bought Time Warner Cable. Like,
but I think we've discussed before, like Hulu is the place for Disney to put all their stuff that would never in a million years be on Disney Plus.
Like Prey.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is dumb though, because again, let me watch Alien on Disney Plus. I don't care about.
But they do, and that's what Disney has always been the master of, is their brand.
Man, I kind of get in the branding. Like when I click on Disney, I very much expect a certain thing.
Yep.
I mean, sure, but also I've been using my VPN a lot and going on there and just typing in Fresh to the search and seeing Fresh come up and seeing that they listed as a thriller because there are no horror movies on Disney Plus. That's an hilarious moment for me.
That's also because you're using a VPN, so you're getting
another country.
You're getting it from a different territory.
It tells you that they could just unlock the doors right away, but because it's America,
they could. But established
it's because it's America, and people would lose their shit.
Exactly.
But like, here's the thing: they did lose their shit like a year ago or so when they first announced that like Deadpool was going on there. Did it actually hurt them? No. The stuff in Florida is hurting them because
I don't know how much. I don't think that stuff is actually hurting them.
It's like hurting them in like a PR way, but like Bob Iger doesn't care. But
that's the thing. The stuff that's going on in Florida isn't really hurting them that much right now because it's fucking DeSantis just making clown shoe moves continually, and Disney able to slide things in that make them look like they're smarter than anyone should ever fuck with.
Yeah, it's making them look bad to the people that are already lost. I should say to the people that we already are like those people don't like.
Well, those people don't matter. They're the same people that are going to go to Disney next week after talking all this shit about it, just like how Ron DeSantis got married at Disney.
Yeah. They're also the people that complain that they change like aspects of rides because they're making them less racist.
I'm just saying, like, this stuff might matter to those people for a week. I don't believe for a second that they're going to cancel Disney Plus if an adult using Disney Plus is able, again, my example, to watch Alien on Disney Plus. I don't think those people are actually going to cancel it. They have parental locks. You can make sure that your children can't watch Alien.
I get that, but I don't see Disney having already acquired the 67% share of Hulu being like, we don't want it anymore.
I mean, sure.
I also wonder if having them separate, they can kind of play some games to sell one service over the other to other countries, like say China.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
that's the thing. Hulu doesn't really exist in a lot of other countries.
No. Yes, and in a lot of those countries, it's its own thing entirely. Like Hulu Japan is an entirely different service. It's entirely separate from our Hulu, which I learned because they're one of the producers of The Head, and they're prominently listed in the credits. And they're just a completely different service in Japan, completely unrelated to American Hulu. I don't even think they're owned by Disney in Japan. So yeah, like it's interesting. Hotstar and Star are the two services that are kind of the Disney preferred spin-offs in those countries. And again, that's not even owned by Disney. Apparently, it's more of like a partnership situation, and it's part of their strategy of incorporating media from I can't remember the name of the towns, but Bollywood, of course, and I think it's Tollywood is the other one, and that kind of media, which is getting really big. So it makes sense for them to invest in it, because those movies are like breaking theatrical records after the pandemic or something. So yeah, like. I feel like we always end up getting sucked into the Disney black hole.
Yeah, well,
because they own so much.
I don't mind it, but I'm just,
it's so much of the popular entertainment that we like does come from them, whether you want to admit it or enjoy it or not. Like, so it's hard not to.
Yeah, it's almost a sign of the apocalyptic monopolies that.
It's also they're like the last bastion of a large business that presumably gives a shit about people, even though they don't. But they put on that fucking front because, like, Apple doesn't even try that
compared to
anymore.
other gigantic, nasty corporate monsters. Like, they're the least bad. Like they're not actively, openly being horrible to people.
Exactly.
Like Bob Iger versus DeSantis, I'm voting for Iger every single time. I want to see Iger crush him between his his palms.
Like Iger or whoever's there is not getting brought up to Congress to testify about like their horrible business practices.
No.
Yep.
No.
Yeah.
No. And as soon as the presidential elections and campaigning and that starts in full, like DeSantis is going to fucking fall off of this real quick because Disney already checkmated them. So.
It just makes him look bad. It actually is like really hurt, like legitimately hurt him.
That and putting fingers hurt him quite a bit too. I don't think that helped. And I'm using putting fingers as an example of a larger problem. Apparently, this is not a politics podcast, but I guess we're here now.
Yeah, whatever. Who gives a fuck?
But it's like a larger thing about his. I don't like that they're using this term, but his autistic behavior is something that I believe I've seen said. And it's just
he's he's a kind of throwback to 90s conservative guy.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And I think a lot of people weren't alive for that and don't remember it, but that's what he is. With like
Yeah.
this weird veneer of Trumpism.
Mhm.
But
Yeah.
he's a little bitch. I'll say
Yeah.
that. He has the weakest voice of anyone public speaking I've heard in a long time.
I don't even know if I can tell you what he sounds like. It's the old
Which is
John
also
Oliver
a
Kushner.
big problem that he has, is that no one knows what the fuck he sounds like. And he also just looks like a guy. He
Yeah.
looks like head one in whatever game you're playing to like create your character.
It's like if you randomly clicked show me a white guy. Yeah.
Well, I mean, that actually sums up most Florida politicians pretty well, Lou. Because thinking about Gates, it's also like, all right, yeah, he's like if you fuck with the forehead options a little bit too much.
Yeah, and he can't even go to Disney World because they don't allow him. He has some restrictions of who he can be around.
That's wonderful. Anyways, all right.
To segue way back, one of the shows I'm watching, I'll do them quick. I've been watching one show on Apple, one show on Netflix. Apple, we were talking about before we started, Ted Lasso. It's fucking so good. I know you guys are watching it. It's really great. And now I just keep watching it, looking at Brett Goldstein in the show and being like, this guy's going to be Hercules to go back to Disney.
Well, is he though? Is he though? Because we don't know what's going on with all that. But yeah, I'm still excited that he's in the universe now, because even before I really knew who he was, like I was like, oh, that guy's Hercules. Just look at him. He's perfect.
And every shot they have him shirtless. It's like, oh yeah, he has the super hairy chest. He's really funny and gruff. With Disney, like I would really be interested. We got a little bit in Wakanda Forever of like same-sex relationship. I doubt that they will do it, but man, if they made like Hercules like
the
pansexual,
polyamorous monster,
polyamorous,
not even polyamorous. You're right, pansexual. Yeah.
Well, I mean, it depends. Is he the co-star of a show, or is he in a movie? That seems to be like the dividing line. On the shows, they're like, yeah, She-Hulk twerks.
Yeah.
she meets Megan Thee Stallion.
To touch on that real quick, it's something I was talking about with. Sorry to interrupt, Lou. Something I was talking about with some guys that I work with. Like people were talking about the Eternals, and I was saying like I enjoyed it, but I also feel like that was Disney trying to step into like more mature waters, and it wasn't quite the right time. And I feel like
because they had their characters fuck.
Well, that and just everything about it. I mean, the fact that they got Chloe Zhao to direct it. But I mean, just what I was trying to get at is that the TV shows, or at least the shows on Disney Plus, seem to be willing to try and do stuff like that and be a little bit more mature, and it has worked out really well for them. I think more so than anything they've done in the movies.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, yeah, it just has. It's worked for them. It's, regardless of their, I guess, success rate in quotes. Like I think that they've done more interesting things on Disney Plus in general. And but
to go into one
I don't mind.
What's up, Lou?
Oh, go ahead, Arlen. Sorry.
My point kind of fell apart there at the end. So yeah, you go. You were saying.
I was just saying, like, to go with one of them, especially because a teaser just dropped. Like, I thought Ms. Marvel did way more than I thought that show was ever going to do with like addressing like all the stuff of the, I can't remember, like the splitting of India and Pakistan and all that historical content. Like, that's some dark ass shit. Like,
it is.
Getting into like the racial stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, it would be like if in the middle of a Captain America movie, somebody was like, the Soviet Union wasn't actually all that bad.
Or even just be like, well, actually, Cap, most of those Nazis that you thought you were sending away to prison actually ended up working for the United States Science Division. Yeah.
It would be like that. It was like way more. I know this term is fucking been abused by the worst people, but it was like way more woke than I expected anything from Disney ever to be. Because I just think of Disney as so centrist and like, yeah, not even conservative, just centrist and like not willing to like take a side on anything.
To quote a sports ball man, Michael Jordan once said, because people are like, oh, why don't you get political? He's like, Republicans buy sneakers too. And I feel like that's been Disney's MO for forever. But one side is so crazy at this point that not being crazy means you're on the other side.
Well, and that's exactly what I was going to say, is that, like, I don't even think it's that Disney is purposely trying to push a leftist agenda. It's just what they're presenting is just like, hey, this is how a decent and fair human being would act. And we're all like, oh yeah, that makes sense. Okay, cool. Yeah. And all the people on the right are like, it's women and they're fucking brown skin and they're taking
brown people are allowed to talk in their movies and TV shows. So
exactly.
They're brown skin that I absolutely do not adore. I do not love. Do not look at my search history at all. You can.
So what was the other thing you were going to say? You were watching
Netflix show I've been watching is, I heard a lot about it. One of the teachers I work with had told me about it, but it was like the biggest non-English show on Netflix in 22. Extraordinary Attorney Woo. It's a Korean show. Have you guys heard of it?
I think
the name sounds familiar, but that's about it.
It's about a Korean attorney. She's a woman. And she is high functioning autistic. It is a comedy. It seems like no one is getting like saying her portrayal is bad or anything. But it is funny, but it's also like very heartfelt and like kind of deals with the relationships of like her dad's like, oh, she asked him like, what was it like being the father of someone with autism? He's like extremely lonely. And they do like a flashback and she's like playing with a toy and he steps on the toys and like falls and gets hurt and she just like doesn't react and he's like, aren't you sad? Like, I'm hurting, daddy's crying. And she just ignores him. And then he has a full breakdown and like that kind of aspect of, because he's a single parent, it's like and like her trying to decide like, can she actually love someone? Like, is that something she's capable of? And like, how does she know if they are actually treating her right?
No, that's interesting because I've never really thought about like how another country would portray things like autism and just people
that's
being
a
on
big
the
thing
spectrum.
too. Yeah, being an American, it's like they kind of have like when autism first kind of became known, like viewpoint of it. Like a lot of people almost treat her like she's has like a very low IQ or like because like when certain characters with her, they're like, oh, you're like, yeah, basically. I was trying to figure out the right wording, but yeah,
but I mean, if you're talking in just general reference, I think it's okay to say that. It's not like you're saying, hey, the retarded. Yeah,
and like the guy she's with is like doesn't know how to deal with it.
Right.
And then
to your point, there are absolutely people alive today who are still like that's their frame of reference. Is those words that work?
Yeah, and it does some cool things with like they even talk about America. They're like, oh, like they don't have support groups there.
No,
like, there's no cultural understanding. Like there's not doctors or specialists because it's like, oh, like do you want to go to America? Like where they have all this stuff and it's like a very interesting. Like I like looking at that, and it does have the stereotype of like I would say like it's. I have not watched The Good Doctor, which I know is like the American show about a doctor with autism. I feel like it's similar. This is definitely more comedy driven. But like
you're not supposed to be inspired by the autistic person. You're supposed to laugh at them. Got it. Right.
I think you're supposed to laugh at like how she like people like underestimate her, and then she makes them look like fucking morons.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, it all says her IQ was like 164, and just a person with that level of IQ enough would be impressive. This is interesting to me. What would be the most interesting part for me though is like the legal system in another country because I know
it is so interesting because like watching them in like the courtroom, like after seeing like half the season so far, like and it's like a 20 episode season, and I think they did say they're coming back for a second season. Korean legal system is so fucking different. they can change like defense, like because she's a private attorney, like she can just change defense tactics like on the dime, like do a whole bunch of stuff. But there's a lot more like respect and not necessarily procedure, but like decorum. I think as much.
So kind of like a British court, not like with the pomp and circumstance, but that it's
and
about.
And there's not a judge. There's like it's like a 3-judge thing. There's a jury, but judges have the final ruling. Like they take into account what a jury says in a criminal case, but the judge has the final say, even in a murder case.
Huh.
Oh, so they have the tribunal there. Are they stacked on top of each other? Are they wearing like a purple thing over their gold outfit?
No, they're like aside, but the prosecutors do wear like a special outfit.
I was
they have like
more
microphones
about the tribunal from Marvel Comics.
Oh,
yeah.
It actually kind of looks similar.
Yeah. That has me curious. I don't know why this inspires this line of thinking, but it reminds me of a documentary about the mafia in Italy. And do either of you know anything about the Italian legal system or the way it works there?
I mean, I remember seeing some stuff about that on Trust, that FX series that what's his fucking face did, but that's all the more I remember.
Yeah, the Sutherland and Fraser and all that. Not Fraser the character, Brendan Fraser. To be clear, but in Italy, a witness can interrogate the person on trial. It's part of their legal system, and it's a
that seems like a bad idea.
Yeah, and they can go on for as long as they want.
Oh no!
They can spend hours interrogating the person and confronting the person who's on trial, and it's just all weird. And they have like a full panel of judges too, and the judges will they'll be like, okay, calm down. Calm down on that's just my memory of this documentary, but it's just anyway, just something that came to mind. But no, Lou, you've got me interested. Netflix has been like paying a lot for Korean shows, and just so many of them come around that I just don't have time to check them out.
From what I've seen, it seems like their like live action stuff has really, it's way more evolved than I think even Japan has gotten to at this point.
Mm-hmm.
I would agree.
And like there's especially like their cinema, and I think now like we've seen that over the last like 5 or 6 years, kind of push through between like first was Train to Busan, and then what was the one that won like the Oscars?
Parasite.
Parasite. It's like now it's like like they're kind of pushing through on Netflix where like it's a show not dubbed at all. And is the number one that's kind of a big deal compared to like there's a lot of Spanish stuff on Netflix, and to beat that up is like huge.
Yeah, well those two markets are like the dominant things on Netflix outside of English language stuff. And yeah, it's fascinating how, and it's the 1-2 punch I think of Parasite and Squid Game where just that entire industry, specifically the Korean film industry, we're just getting far more of it than I think we ever have before.
Yeah, and I think like as the people who are like my age and Eric's age, and even like you're a little bit younger, like we've grown up on watching a shit ton of stuff with subtitles, like anime has been on for forever, and kids now like almost all like they don't watch anything besides like sports and anime at this point from like kids I see. Like it is such a big thing, like they don't give a shit about subtitles at all. And I don't think that's the barrier it used to be.
No, I think the barrier is more the attention gap than anything. It's not even
that's definitely it.
It's just like from I interact with kids far less than Lou, just Lou. So like I have no idea in some of this, but from my understanding, kids just don't want to spend that much time on things, and they don't like watching things on TVs.
I tried to show movies, and literally the kid was like, I don't get what's going on. I'm like, you've been playing on your phone this whole time. It's like, well, I tried to watch for like 10 minutes, and I don't get it. I'm like, it's a movie. You have to watch more than 10 minutes. Like, you got to see the introduction of characters.
It's wild to me, because my youngest brother is only a couple years older. And it's like the chart of like the monkey turning into a man thing. It's and I can like see it in real time. I'm like, see, my brother is like a core sample of a person who graduated in 2018 from high school, and like how it's slowly still like exponentially like degrading the attention span.
Yeah, it's not like I'm showing like board movies. I'm showing them like Princess Mononoke before we start talking about Japan, and like they cannot watch it. I'm like, it's almost nonstop fighting, like in that movie. And
it does make me think that I think there's going to be like I hope there's going to be like a rubber band thing where like there's going to be an active culture among the Zoomers to like purposefully expand their tensions. I would hope that's going to happen. I don't know.
We'll see what happens with TikTok and what the government can do.
To some extent, I mean, it kind of hits on two different things. The whole subtitles aren't a big deal anymore, and attention span. I think a lot of kids probably have gotten into anime because if they are watching it with subtitles, they're forced to pay attention to it. And then they're like, oh, this is actually cool. I want to see the next episode. And that's why it's become so big, because there's probably a lot of kids who are all sub, no dub.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And it's also, I mean, my youngest boy, he's 20. He has started watching just crazy movies all the time. Like, he asked me the other day, but like a week ago, he and I were talking. He's like, yeah, have you ever seen Enter the Void? Because he was saying how he'd watch that, and like, he's super into A24 stuff, and he's willing to try a little bit of anything. So I don't know if it's a matter of him being a little bit older than the Gen or the Zillennials, whatever the fuck they are at this point. But I think there's a weird switch that might go off for some of them, that because they're finally getting through COVID and all that, some of them are going to start turning back to being normal.
I also think a big thing is they don't watch. They watch everything on their phone.
Yep.
Yeah. I mean, it may have sounded like I was like, clowning on my youngest sibling, but I will give him this credit. Like, I'll go into conversations with him with assumptions of like, oh, well, you just weren't paying attention, or I'll come in with like bad faith arguments, and he'll completely dismiss it. Like, no, I get it. I get the vibes. I get the theme. Like, he says things. I'm like, oh, okay. I was just completely wrong. You are much smarter than I gave you credit for. Like, he'll disarm things where it's like a bad assumption. And then he'll just like very like in a technical way be like, but I just didn't understand what was going on. I didn't understand how these two concepts connected to each other. I didn't understand how these themes, I thought the theme didn't really make sense, or it didn't fit with this other thing going on. I was like, okay, so I think my assertion of wanting a rubber band is because I've seen some of the rubber band that could happen.
I think some of it too, and this is speaking as the resident old man, is because you're getting older, Arlen, and your tolerance for people younger than you is getting lesser and lesser. So when you're like, you assume that they haven't seen something, or they're being typical Zillennial, whatever, then they actually have a real answer. You're like, oh fuck. Yeah, that's what's happening, sir.
I mean, yes. Also, I love my brother, but they've made some really fucking dumb shit choices in their life.
Well, that's what happens.
Yeah. But the last thing I'll say is, I think another thing is there's a kind of movie, TV show literacy of like the pacing that has been completely evaporated. Because like, even like, because I have a kid, little kid shows at this point are like 10 to 15 minutes long. 15 is max. Like some shows are like 5 minutes. And like, and even when we were little kids, it's like they were half hour. Like, Justice League cartoons were an hour.
Even by the time I'm watching that kind of stuff, it's only like maybe it's in like the 20-minute range. And like difference of 7 minutes there is actually quite a bit.
It's
Trying
huge.
to watch one of these things. Yeah, it's crazy. But also, I might be, just because I'm from like this like intermediary generation. I was also growing up on like old Mr. Rogers stuff, and like old Sesame Street was also re-airing. So I had a little bit of both. I had like, I don't know if this is still running, but Dragon Tales, and Caillou and stuff like that, and like other little kid stuff.
Fuck that bald-headed cancer bitch.
Yeah, Caillou's after me.
I can't believe he's still around. Also, infuriating to learn.
But yeah,
go ahead. Go ahead.
I was gonna say, like, we threw on, I think it's on Netflix. They had like one of the streaming services had like Magic School Bus, and we were like, oh, let's throw this on. It's like the pacing is so fucking different from like was that like, and it feels old, like 20 years ago, 25 years ago.
It feels like watching old Masters of the Universe or Captain Planet, where like you try and watch one of those. Even in like a small episode, the plotting is so slow, and it's not anything that would even be considered average in terms of like storytelling and like it's just
it's like for most of these shows I've seen, like it's like every 45 seconds there's like a big shift or a big, like that's as long as they can stay, like 45 seconds to a minute, like on a thing, and then we have to go. It's like they're jumping around that quickly, which makes sense when they're like 10-minute episodes.
I wonder what the change was though, because I mean, for me, like the last thing that I was really paying attention to, I guess, was like the last golden age of shows for kids, because my boys were watching like SpongeBob and Flapjack and Adventure Time and the normal show or whatever the fuck it is, the one with the blue jay.
Yeah. Like, those are all it's the one after that. They switched from a half hour to like 15 minute.
But are they
chunks.
still taking up a half hour time slot?
They'll do two 15-minute ones back to back.
Oh god.
And now they have like, they're like 7 minutes, so they'll do like 2 of one and 2 of another in a half hour block.
Well, and what's interesting about that is that's the Adult Swim model. Like that's the Adult Swim model of scheduling. Of like, here's a 7-minute short film, a man getting clawed by a bear, and then we're going to show you 15 minutes of no, Metalocalypse actually gets pretty long, but what's the other one?
Back too.
But even that, like, trying to use the Adult Swim thing is like, you knew the interstitials were just interstitials, and like their 15-minute or 11-minute shows were still an entire 11-minute show. It wasn't like trying to fit in 3 different episodes of something and do that time block.
Yeah, they're squeezing it even further. Like they're condensing it even further.
Yeah, because we put on the like Rocketeer thing they did, and it's like, I was like, oh, this is like cocaine fueled. Like it feels like it is just like boom, 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 boom. Because it's just like it's like this is the only way to keep a kid's attention span. It's like hyper. Like they must have done, someone somewhere must have done like, oh, kids this age that we want watching the show only have an attention span for this long, and there's so many options now, plus their phone, that if we don't keep changing stuff, then we're going to lose them.
That makes sense.
If I had to hazard a guess as to like how this occurred, it's phone apps and letting kids use phone apps very young, and those apps are full of animations and things.
Oh, YouTube is like, we carefully curate the YouTube, because it's like one video and it goes to like Cocomelon, which is like a death spiral. We're like, I don't want that film to touch my YouTube, because like there's like 800 other shitty like not Cocomelons, and they're all horrible monsters like that.
Well, the big question though is, how many videos of Elsa and pregnant Spider-Man have you shown your child?
Oh, now you're showing your age, because that was YouTube issues like a decade ago.
Something like that,
yeah. But it's still like we're still feeling the reverberations of that now. Like the Yeah,
Mhm.
that caused a whole run-on effect of other things to
Well, that
happen.
and it's so bizarre. I've always wanted to delve deeply and find what the craziest things that people were fitting into that stuff. And I know there were some really horrible things that apparently were getting mixed in there.
There was
And
lots of
Yeah.
like murder. Like I think I've heard one where Peppa Pig just like starts stabbing the shit out of everybody.
Oh,
No,
I'm here for it.
that was an intentional troll though. That one was like somebody purposefully putting that in there. But no, so a lot of that was
It was like
there's
early AI stuff with like
some
Yeah.
of it.
I feel like
Well,
Russia or
so-
China.
There's a video. It's way too long of a video for me to tell people to go watch it. But there's a Dan Olson video where he did a whole deep dive on these channels and how they function. And what he found is that it was a network of channels that were all like recutting and like shuffling this content over and over again. And they were using the same character models, and it's like animation house in China, if I remember correctly. And it's literally just like it's SEO spam style of like constructing things. So you're like taking the popular keywords of one week and like mashing them all together. And
Oh,
you're
so
just
they're kind of South Parking it, where they're putting
Yeah.
out new stuff every week.
yes, I'm using week as just like so we have a time concept. This could be happening within a day. It could be happening
Yeah.
within
Okay.
an hour. And they're
I
pumping
think this is like early getting AI to grab key things and then handing it to somebody who then
yeah.
makes
And they
something.
animate based off that. So the script is written based off of an algorithm, and then you make the thing that algorithm told you to make.
And
And
the
you're not
algorithm
really-
told you to make Spider-Man very pregnant.
Yes.
Yeah, and it's all just to pull in ad revenue to get the YouTube ads.
It's
Hulk
insane.
gets Elsa pregnant, and then he carries Elsa to the end of a to the end of a beach, and he throws her in the water, and then she gives birth, and she freezes the water. Yeah, like that's some of the weird stuff that I've seen from that video in particular. And it gets really, really obscure and dark and macabre. Some of it.
Well, I guess the bigger question is, how hard was it to keep yourself erect while you were watching this?
I mean, not as hard.
Not as hard as you would think.
Uh,
All right. So let me get to my stuff that I've watched and played recently that we've been going on for an hour. I recently, just today, finished the show Beef on Netflix. It's got Stephen Yeun and Ali Wong in it, along with a bunch of other people like David Cho, who's a great fucking artist, and he's always kind of been just a rabble rouser, and he's so good as Stephen Yeun's character's cousin in it, who's kind of a scumbag. It's pitch black comedy, so there are parts where it's like, I don't know if this is supposed to be funny or if I should be horrified or both at the same time. And it shows that Ali Wong is a fucking beast when it comes to being a dramatic actress, like you had mentioned earlier, Lou, about how comedians oftentimes can do dramatic roles really well.
Yeah, I'm here. I'm just listening. Yeah, I don't know. I think everything. I love her stand up. Like I've seen her in a bunch of shows, and like I think she's extremely talented.
Yeah, the little bit I know of her, she is.
Sorry, I was Googling David Cho because I was like, is he the guy that made all the money off Facebook? And yes, he is.
He did?
Yes, because the whole thing was he painted a mural for Zuckerberg in Facebook office.
I forgot about
And
that.
he's like, don't give me money, pay me in stock before it went public.
Yeah, you got 200
And he's
million.
basically like, that's why he does whatever the fuck he wants.
Yeah, that like
Yeah.
he, my friends who used to live in town owned a mid-century / like, I don't know, like the type of art gallery that would have like Dunnies and stuff like that. Like they had a nice mix of mid-century stuff and things like that. But he came in when I forget where I was living at the point, but he came in and had a showing at their gallery and like hung out with them for the whole weekend. And my friend Lisa, I remember her telling me, like, saying that he's a madman. Like it was fun,
Yes,
but he's
I've heard him
insane.
on a podcast that I used to listen to that I don't anymore because the host is a fucking
He's shit.
shithead. And
Yeah,
he basically said like, oh, he has a cousin who he's like as his personal assistant. He's like, I pay him to stop me from gambling away all my money. So like when he goes to Vegas, because he's just like, I have like $1 billion, so like whatever, I don't care anymore. He's like, I will bet, and his job is to just take the money off the table and put it in his pockets.
That's great. But yeah,
And the cousin was like, yeah, this is awesome, but it's hard. It's actually a hard job.
I believe it because he was already unhinged before he had money. So now I imagine he's even worse. But Beef is amazing. I also recently watched the Blackcoat's Daughter. I actually watched that tonight. Speaking of movies that don't really know what they're doing with their tone and kind of just leave you to, I don't want to say put everything together, because I mean it was pretty obvious what was going on, but I don't know. There was something about this movie that felt like it was trying to do something clever and it didn't pull it off as well as it thought it did.
Yeah.
That's the best way for me to describe it. Like, I thought it was creepy when it decided to start really getting into the meat of what the story was, but it took like an hour to get there, and
Yeah.
Yeah.
I thought, I'm sort of the same feeling. And like, I went in after having already seen Pretty Thing That Lives in This House.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure I'm only saying like a third of that title.
You got most of it right.
Yeah. But so I was like expecting something that's going to be a bit challenging and a bit weird. And I was like, okay, so I know what I'm in for. No, it's not even as like well put together as that. It very much feels like a movie that it has a thing in mind, but I don't necessarily think it gets there all the way, which is, I mean, exactly what you said. Like, that was my feeling at the time. I thought the actress's name, who I'm forgetting, both of their performances, Emma Roberts and
Sabrina,
Kira, their performances and they managed to make the character feel like the same person, which is an achievement. So good for them.
Yeah, I was definitely left guessing the whole time, and like at one point I had a theory like, oh, she's going to turn into her, because like when she supposedly got shot, she's going to be in the hospital and she's going to be pulling the wristband off because she changed form. But go ahead, sorry.
But yeah, like aside from that, I just I was like, okay, there's no point to this. And I just, for me, if you're telling a story about mental illness or serial killers and serial killers with mental illness, like, you need to either have a point, or you need to be, or your point needs to be accurately portraying how this works. And it doesn't do either of those things.
Well, but I didn't even get the impression it was supposed to be about serial killers. It was people being possessed by the same demon.
Right. I don't know what it's about. It doesn't have like an intent to it, is the thing. It's like, you kind of need that. Like, if this is supposed to be a story about a Herbert Mullen type person, and Herbert Mullen is the guy who was like, I'm going to cut every single person's dick on Earth off and kill them. That's that guy who like saw like a floating head following him everywhere, and like he claimed God told him to kill the entire Earth. If that's the kind of story you're telling, you do need to kind of like say that. It needs to be in the text.
But that's the thing. Even when they got to the quote unquote reveal, like, it seemed very cut and dry. That's why I'm like, I'm not sure where you're getting the whole like serial killer aspect from.
I'm saying it's in that realm of things. Like, that's one of the assumptions you can come to, is that it's supposed to be that, or she is really seeing the devil and she's really making a pledge to the devil or something like that. But like, I'm just saying it needs to come from somewhere. I understand people want to make movies that are obscure, and they want to make movies where you can come to your own conclusions about what's going on. I do think you need to follow some internal logic that makes sense, though. This is just my general feeling. Like, you need to have your own rules and you need to stick to those rules. And not sticking to those rules is a mistake. It just is, in my opinion. Like, you know,
well, yeah, that's the biggest way you can lose an audience with a horror movie is if you don't establish what the rules of your world are very early on.
Most important part of any horror, sci-fi, anything.
Yep.
You need rules.
Yeah, and I'm predisposed to be interested in the subject of the Blackcoat's Daughter. That's the other thing. Eric, you know this. Like, this is the kind of stuff where I'm like, yes, this is my thing. You know, those visuals were so interesting, and I was like, I was very into the aesthetics of it all, and it just managed to completely bore me and push me away in the end.
Well, I feel like this is the movie that people watch. People have the opinion that A24 is all boring horror. Like, this is the type of thing they'd watch and see A24 and be like, see, I'm right. And I get it. Like, early on, when they were dipping their toes into producing horror films, they definitely went for stuff that was a bit more obtuse. But now I think as a company, they've learned, all right, if we're going to have our A24 logo plastered on this, then we need to make sure it's something that's of a higher quality, because they've kind of gotten pinned into that now.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, and they're not at the point where they can't like spend money to like do post on these projects anymore. Which is the big difference between, I think, Blackcoat's Daughter is like 2014. Like, that's the biggest difference between 2014 A24 and 2023 is like 10 years of growth and like being able to put a little bit more work into it. I mean, you know,
well, that and The Witch, Hereditary, and Midsommar.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the most recent movie I can think of where, like, I think that the people who made that movie got it right relatively is Saint Maud. Very similar films, dealing with similar things, similar themes, concepts. And although I do think Saint Maud is a bit too up its ass for its own good,
yes,
I think it does a lot of the same things, and I think it gets them absolutely right.
Well, I mean, to go on to the granular at least, and for me, the difference why like Saint Maud was more interesting, even though like I told my youngest son earlier today when we were talking about Saint Maud, I'm like, I'm not sure how I feel about this movie, but I know it has some great performances. Saint Maud like never once delved too far into like, well, is this supernatural? Like you knew the whole time that the titular Saint Maud was just mentally unhinged.
Yes.
But Blackcoat's Daughter, they leave you with that I don't know, that lingering like, well, you know, there's that giant black bunny looking thing in the corner that might be an actual demon. So that's why I still like, I feel like the dude had the idea for something supernatural, but it fell flat on its face because he didn't give himself enough time to actually expand on that. Like, you got these little hints here and there through the movie. It's like, oh, this is getting interesting. Okay, now we're just back to boring teenage drama.
Yeah.
So it was okay.
It was that's essentially my thing. Is like it's all right, but like he's made better movies since. I thought Gretel and Hansel, or
it was Gretel and Hansel.
That
was quite good.
Very solid. Again, everything made sense. That it set its own rules and it followed them perfectly. Osgood Perkins is just an interesting director to me, though. So like I wasn't like, oh, I'm going to write this guy off. It's like, oh, this is interesting. And it is interesting to look at Blackcoat's Daughter and like the context of his dad being Anthony Perkins. That's interesting, I guess. Like, but it's a movie though. Whenever it comes up, and there are people out there who are like, I love Blackcoat's Daughter. I'm like, why?
Okay. Yeah,
I need you to explain yourself and what it is that you like about it.
The last thing I wanted to slip in real quick that I watched relatively recently was a movie called Rigor Mortis, which is a Korean film, and it's fucking bananas. Like, do you guys care if I spoil anything about this? I don't know if you're ever going to watch this. All right, so go ahead. No, what were you going to say, Arlen?
I was gonna say it's on the list, but it might not be for a while. So yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
So, I mean, the movie opens with an actor who's, I guess, not getting roles anymore, and he's going to this rundown, like, hotel apartment complex to kill himself. He's hanging himself. It seems that he's getting possessed by some sort of spirit while he's doing so. And then this crazy neighbor, other person who lives in the complex, wearing a robe and crazy glasses, jump kicks through the door and cuts the rope with a crazy knife. You find out later that this guy's a vampire hunter. There's also a warlock living in the house, and there's a woman who seems to have some sort of witch-like abilities. The woman who's a witch, her husband dies, and they put the spirits of these two girls that were murdered in the apartment complex into his body. But something goes on that he ends up becoming a hopping vampire, and the vampire hunter and this guy who is trying to kill himself end up fighting the vampire. Then the big twist at the end of the movie is that all of the people that he was interacting with that were fighting these ghosts and was a vampire hunter were all people he saw as he was coming into the apartment complex to kill himself, and he succeeded in killing himself. So they Wizard of Oz you at the end of the movie.
It's like Jacob's Ladder.
Yeah, kind of.
Or to circle back, they sucker punched you.
Yes.
Yeah.
I don't think he was being raped, but yeah, it
You
was,
never know.
That's true. I can't speak for the metaphoric abilities of Korean filmmakers. But it's visually super interesting, and it's a lot of fun. And then that ending happens, and I'm just like, you fucking idiot. Like, you fucked up all the goodwill I had for this movie, which I would have been like, yeah, that was a lot of fun. It's not the best thing on earth, but it's really cool. And then you do that, and it's like, okay.
Yeah,
I mean, it's still worth watching for the visuals, but yeah. Shit the bed.
That may all of that checks out just from everything I've heard about the movie. I've heard like because this is one of those that's been circling around for a while. I was like, I hear about the monster design and like the cool aesthetic, martial arts and all that stuff, but I rarely ever hear people be like, "Oh, I love the plot," or "I think the ending is great." So that completely checks out.
Yeah, well, it's not, so don't worry about it. Yeah. But yeah, that's about it for me. I mean, I've been playing a bunch of stuff on my Steam Deck, but nothing that I'm going to bore Arlen with.
You activated a movie that, because we haven't done one of these in a while, so I will talk about this here. An opinion on a movie that I think everybody should go and watch. It's been around for a while. It's called The Witch, The Subversion, I want to say. It's a Korean movie. I don't know how to sell this movie. It's very much like, so it very much starts off as, I would call it Firestarter or Carrie adjacent. That's where it begins. Like, it starts
magical girl.
Yeah, magical child.
Like
Scary magical child
with
yes.
Implied child with abilities. And there is a what's it called? Is it called The Park? It's
the workshop or something like that.
Yeah, something like that. And like there's very much an equivalent to that at the very beginning. And it goes from there, and it's like it becomes very like a De Palma mystery thriller type thing for a while there. And it's like, government machinations, people following each other, people stalking each other. I'm gonna get into this taxi, and then but a government person like pulls me into a black van, like that kind of thing. It's a lot of like setup and tension, and it like builds for a while, and then the movie at the end, it turns into like about as close to live action anime as any movie I've ever seen.
Okay.
Like, it just completely turns on a dime, and you have characters who are like smashing through like walls and doors, constantly like catching bullets and things like that. Characters like instant transmissioning behind each other. It devolves into like insane action sequences that are really well done. And it's just it goes wild at the end. And I I highly recommend watching this movie, which just once it starts to really cook, it's one of my favorite movie experiences I've had.
What's the name of it
in a
again?
while. The Witch, the Subversion. The Witch Part 1, the Subversion. Don't worry about that. One.
I think some of those just popped up recently on one of the streaming services, because I think there's a couple of them, aren't there?
Part 1 and Part 2 came to Shudder.
Okay.
I think it was on Netflix for a while, but like it's one of those where it's like it's been there for a while, and
it must have been when I was last on Shudder, because I got rid of my subscription for a little bit just because everything is so goddamn expensive. Even though Shudder is the cheapest thing out there, but regardless, it's interesting you mentioned like the whole it's doing this and then it's doing this, and it's same thing with the movie I was talking about. It kind of ties back into what you were saying, Lou, about their court system, how like it turns on a dime. Mm-hmm. I feel like with a lot of the more genre like Korean films, they tend to do that a lot. And that might be why their films seem so interesting to foreign audiences, because they're getting a lot of different plot in there without having to dedicate an entire movie to it. Go ahead, sorry.
Other parts, especially for like horror, why Korean culture works well with it is that they're still, even though they are very modern, like extremely modern, like Tokyo, but like both Japan and Korea still have a very kind of outwardly conservative, very like you are supposed to be modest, you're not supposed to put yourself up, and
ancestral
kind of
stuff.
Yeah, ancestral stuff. There's a lot more like there's not Christian stuff necessarily, although it's there. But you have like in spirituality, but you have this kind of similar thing to like I feel like if you go back to like maybe like 60s, 70s America, like kind of cultural, like you being outwardly like popular, or like even though like it's I'm trying to do like be like it's almost like the baseline is much more like culturally conservative. And so, like, when you play against that or have that play into your plot, it, like, works really well. And I think American audiences can connect to that who have grown up on, like, movies of those eras. Like, it's very similar kind of thing, if that makes sense at all.
No, I kind of get what you were going at. Like, I think it was a longer way of going. It's just that the films have a sensibility that American 70s and 80s films did.
Yeah, like it's always like in American like 70s and 80s films, it's like if the kid has sex, that kid's dying. Like, I feel like you get a lot of similar vibes in Korean horror kind of stuff as well.
But at the same time, their technique is extremely
modern.
Advanced.
Yes.
I wouldn't even say modern. I would say ahead of everybody else. I would even go so far as to say like pushing the boundaries of like where things can go, along with Indian film. Both are like willing to go way out there in terms of how.
Well, and it's part of their weird modern culture, like right now culture is like they've somehow figured out that like the best thing for like on the South Korean economy is like a lot of stuff, but like they know that exporting their cultural stuff is like what is selling right now. So like you can literally go to school to like become a pop icon. Like you go to like they have it's like built into the system.
Absolutely.
Like all of this stuff to like and film school and all like they know that they need all of this shit. And I also think that there is a huge like one of the things there is like because you have to like join the military, and one of the ways to get around that for a while is by becoming like doing shit. So I think a lot of people like I need to do this shit before I get forced into this thing. And kind of like there's a big kind of push at their backs, pressure that I think makes them forces them to create crazy shit.
Some of it too, I think, might be that it's a younger generation who had more Western influence in their lives growing up. I'm not saying as much now, but back then, like even the smallest bit, I'm guessing could alter their viewpoint enough that they're like, well, wait, why should I do it this way when I can try something completely different? And I think that's why we're seeing this like renaissance of Korean films specifically, because I feel like Japanese films haven't.
I feel like it's kind of like what China was going through in like the late 90s.
Yep.
Where they except that the people like
Hong Kong specifically.
Yeah, Hong Kong specifically, not mainland China, but like Hong Kong, Taiwan, like Ang Lee guys were like grew up on like the 60s and 70s stuff, and instead like put the Chinese flair to it of like the theatrics, but it's very Shakespearean at the same time of like those kind of 50s and 60s cinema. And we're seeing the kind of that happening in Korea. I think we kind of saw a little bit of that come out of Japan, but not as much. In like the 2000s.
Yeah, 2000s and the 90s. And it's, I mean, you know, it goes back to what was happening in France in the 60s and early 70s, and then Italy in the 70s and 80s. Like, it's, Well, and now we see the other one that's maybe peeking its head out is India. So we'll see if India, I would be real interested to see what a fucking Indian horror film would look like.
Yes.
India, so there are a lot of them. I just haven't tried any of them yet. But they do not understand the concept of staying within a single genre at all.
Well, that's part of Indian
films.
cinema.
It is.
Yeah,
it absolutely is. And like I've talked about my experience on here, I think, of watching the Bahubali films.
Maybe.
Or more recently, RRR. And those, I can't even categorize the genre of those films. Like the best I can do,
it's
or historical epic. If I'm going for something that's not, nationalized, I guess, or like based in any one specific region, like. But even historical epic doesn't do it justice, because I say historical epic, and I'm talking about an American film. There's a very specific tone to that just does not exist in these.
When you say it, I think of two things. I think of like, again, like Chinese historical epics, like Crouching Tiger, Red Cliff, and then an American side historical epic would be like, what do you call it? Like Civil War.
I'd like to point out how amazing we are at naming Chinese films. We named 2 John Woo films.
Yeah,
well, there's a reason. It's specifically like he's the guy, though.
Hey, let's rate. Hey, do we want to get back to rating black guys since it's the 3 of us?
No, but no.
Well, like there's other like I also love John. I also love him. So
Him.
But like to my point, the tone of the Bahubalis or the RRRs, it's much closer to like a Marvel movie. It's much closer to one of those kinds of things where it's much
been real big into the superhero stuff. Plus, that kind of feeds into like the Hindu god stories in the I'm going to butcher the word, the Bhagavad Gita. Are giant epic things. Like I literally have a book Grant Morrison did with the gods because they did animated stuff. Right,
like their religion on its base level, not even digging deep, is superhero stuff. Like that's it's
what we see out of like Greek or Norse. It's just that it's still around and the 3rd biggest religion in the world.
Well, and even that stuff is it's there for us, but it's not primary. Like in
it got washed away, and it's just in the culture as like this thing.
Right.
And Norse is only in there literally because of Marvel Comics. I think at this point, like. I don't think if Marvel Comics was around, anyone would actually know Thor.
Probably not.
Mm-mm.
Well, I do think that like some of that stuff. So some of this stuff is just like cyclical, and it just keeps on coming around. Like every 20 years, people remember that Vikings exist, and they're like, "This is a weird, peculiar thing." And then it goes away for about 20 years, and then in another 20 years, it will come back. And I'll be there, waiting for it. And it keeps on coming like that, or circular. But I think you're right. Like the consistency of it, absolutely, I think comes from Marvel Comics. Certainly.
Well, you'll be waiting for it, just like you'll be waiting in line for water and bread, because half of the country will be underwater at that point.
Not bread, eggs.
Well, build our
maybe
own ships, Eric, and
I'll hopefully be dead by the time that happens. So,
Yeah.
I don't want to
That's
be
right.
around for this.
I saw
wanna
that.
Well, I'm gonna bronze you, Eric, and I'm gonna pretend that
See-
you're there.
See, I'm glad my wife and I are the age we are because we're old enough that we'll get the best aspects of all the terrible global warming, and then the rest of all y'all can deal with it.
Yeah,
I think
like lakes that are tropical. You know that'll
Oh
be
yeah,
fun.
like 70 some odd degree weather in March. Yeah,
when California becomes unsurvivable in 5 years because the
When-
Colorado River disappears.
when most of the cities that were built in deserts start to die out, which is why I keep telling Connor to get the fuck out of Vegas.
Yeah, I
This is
really
the
like.
second black hole of our show. The second thing that we're inevitably sucked towards is apocalyptic talk.
Yes. Fun. Well, we never spend any time talking about it. We just touch on it and then walk away from it. And god damn it, I want to talk about the coming apocalypse.
Oh, it's coming.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
happening.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like, it used to be you would say shit like this and people would be like, oh yeah, haha, or whatever, it's crazy. Now when you talk about the shit, people are like, oh yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, that makes
Like when you
makes
said that
sense.
to Connor, I think I literally just finished a podcast that they're talking about like, oh, like we're at the point where the Colorado River, which provides water and power to everything on the
Everywhere.
west coast and like half of Mexico,
Yeah.
is about to reach the point where it's too low to even use for dams.
Uh-huh.
Like it'll be below there, and then a little bit lower than that, and it reaches Deadpool. Not the character, but it's never coming back, and it just dies.
And that's, I know that's they're trying to like ration off the water and do
But we need those
emergency-
almonds in California
Oh, Christ.
Well,
Yeah.
and then
and golf
you get
courses
people like
in
you have
Arizona.
people like my granddad being like, "Isn't it a plan to like build like a giant canal from from Louisiana to Vegas?" And I'm like, "No,
What would that
nobody's
do?
doing
What would that do? What would that do?
And
anyway?
that wouldn't work."
No.
That would
Why?
do
Why
nothing.
Louisiana? What, to take off from the Mississippi?
Yeah, that's and when he said this to me, he's my granddad, so like, I'm not
So
gonna
you slapped him and shook him and said, "You're not allowed to vote anymore."
This
I
is your
should have.
fault, old man. Yeah.
I should no. It is absolutely his fault, his generation, because he's the generation from Poltergeist of like,
Yeah.
well, we can't smoke weed anymore, and I have to own real estate.
He just moved the headstones. That's all he did.
Exactly.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
it's
Yeah.
like, oh, so yeah, voting for Reagan. That I'm sure that worked out swell. It's just
But he gave us the first lady with the that gave the best head. So
I mean,
Reagan
that is
gave-
true. Yeah.
Lizzie Guzzling Granny. But yeah, I don't know. It's weird to, and I'm continuing with the apocalypse talk. It's weird to be at a point where I'm more looking at that as like, oh yeah, that's going to happen, instead of like, well, it might happen. Like,
Well, there's that, and there's also the ever-present like, if China invades like Hong Kong, and what if this stuff with Russia escalates?
mhm.
Yeah, that's the other thing I keep on thinking of is like, will we cause the current apocalypse that we're absolutely going towards, or will a shakeup happens that causes us to go to a different apocalypse?
Well, and that's the other thing, is that this apocalypse is so boring. Like,
Because you're just watching it happen slowly.
I mean, that is my one quibble with the like, I can't watch The Last of Us because it's like, you know what, I'd be fine with fungus zombies, honestly.
It
I'll
would
take
be an
some-
improvement.
Well, and it's-
yeah.
It's like, speaking of The Last of Us, and I know I've said it before, but it's something my wife had been talking to me about years ago, and I was like, oh, I knew about cordyceps, but I didn't like realize the whole reason that we don't get infected with fungus is because our bodies aren't, or the fungus can't survive in temperatures that high. And I know I've posted a few things in the chat, but seems to be happening more and more that they're like, yeah, these weird spores that aren't able to be destroyed are growing inside people now. Like, just
because they're injecting themselves with ivermectin and
God.
drinking bleach.
well, it's also because the environment is getting to a point that it can
Right.
support things at higher temperatures.
Oh,
That's
yeah.
why.
Well, because
Yeah.
the whole planet's getting warmer.
Yeah, exactly.
And even if it doesn't become a full Last of Us with like weird, like,
Zombies.
aberrations and
Yeah.
things like that, like, we're already in a state currently because of the virus that is still around, by the way, that still is there. It's still causing problems.
There's new strains coming out all the time that are
it's
immune
there. Yeah, it'll be.
But we're learning about symptoms, and we're like realizing, this like brain fog thing. It's still happening, and it's still causing a lot of people to, I don't know, randomly shoot people on the street potentially, or do all kinds of weird things. People are acting erratic in ways that they never.
And they've also, our public leaders have given them permission to do those things. Basically.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
they're encouraging them to do these things, and I'm like, that's the perfect situation for one of these funguses to come around, and for us not to notice that some of these people are doing it even more frequently. Like it's growing, like it's becoming more of a problem. And I could see the fungus not even causing, again, like I was saying, zombies, but just like causing aggression levels to spike in people. Because
I don't even know if I would notice.
Yeah, at this point. But on top of the idea of, sorry, Lou, to interrupt, on top of the idea of just, things like fungus starting to be able to become habitable places in our bodies, then we've got like ice caps and whatnot that are starting to melt at alarming rates. And there are things in there that haven't been on this earth for hundreds of thousands of years that we do not have a single immunity for.
Yep.
Oh, and so two things you remind me of. One, the snow is so bad that they literally can't run the Iditarod. Mm-hmm. That's how warm it is up north. Yep. And they're also cloning mammoth meat at the same time.
Yeah, I saw that.
The mammoth meatball.
Yeah.
Which I'm kind of not. I'm not against like 3D printing meat. Like that would really help like food.
Yeah, they've been working on this for a while. At least 3D printing meat.
If you can put giant cockroaches in, and then it comes out, and it perfectly simulates the texture and taste of beef. I don't see a problem with that.
You made it so much grosser than it is in real life.
I mean, that's better to me than the Snowpiercer version, which is just cockroaches. They haven't even.
Oh well, yeah. That's the reality. Is it's bugs or we 3D print meat, and they are because
and the two things can be the same. You can use one as fuel for the other. Absolutely, yeah.
Well, that's the whole other thing is if we're 3D printing meat, something has to power the machine to do that.
Yes.
Right.
Children.
At least we can maybe get rid of all the cows farting that are
causing all the issues. Yeah,
causing a lot of the issues and all the. So I was talking with our friends came over today. It's like, if they figured out how to make like giant farm equipment electric, that would really solve a lot of greenhouse problems.
Yeah, but none of the farmers want to do that.
They couldn't when the tractor is already $500,000.
Exactly.
That's the thing. They can't afford to do it, and nobody's going to bail them out or give them the money to do it, so they're stuck.
They're just going to point them at somebody else and say, like, those people did it to you, not us in our giant suits.
Also, coal mining companies aren't going to suddenly switch after the farmers do it. They're going to keep on doing greenhouse gases.
What do you mean? Jamaican's going to vote with us?
Yep. Well, no, what's going to happen is all the farmers are going to die off and the government's going to buy their land and make a monocrop. So we're going to have the future of Interstellar.
Right.
Oh, that's already a thing. I watched a TikTok because I'm a bad American. And and it was like it was a discussion. I think it was in Nebraska or Kansas. And it's like, they're like, you guys are so mad, you want to get rid of this stuff. You guys are the ones who deregulated are selling a public property and allowed China to buy, I think it's like 14% of all the public land in the state for farming.
Yeah, I mean that is how China is going to defeat America. It's not going to be a war.
They're going to they're going to corporately own the resources.
Mm-hmm. They're going to own most of the country. So yeah, there's so many different multitudes of ways that the human race can stupidly go out, and they all seem to be happening at once. So it's
more of a fight of which way do we go out?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I'm glad we don't just have like nuclear apocalypse as the only choice, because that was it for the longest time.
That's the one that would be easiest for me, since I would just be like my proximity to the capital, I would just be insta-killed.
Yeah,
Right.
unfortunately, it would take a little bit longer for me because of being in PA. I mean, we're close, but
It really depends on literally the way the winds blow.
I
yeah,
remain unsure because I'm relatively close to missile facilities, but I'm far enough away from Seattle that I don't.
You're not close to the big ones.
No, not close to the big ones. But also we have two mountain ranges on either side of me, so I'm concerned about that. But maybe that'll protect me. I don't know.
I think it
I'll
would.
be vapor. Eric will die of nuclear poisoning, and you'll be fighting people for cat food.
Yes, cat food. You're fighting people for babies on pits. That's what's going to happen. Fucking the road is going to be going on. That's something like when I was younger, I would be like, yeah, it'd be funny being in the apocalypse and Mad Max. Now I'm just like, oh no, I'm going to be walking towards the mushroom cloud as quickly as I can.
It's like, yeah, if I can't survive without coffee and Advil, I can't handle the apocalypse.
Right. I mean, I know I've probably made this joke before. I am absolutely Charlize Theron in The Road. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Done. I'm out. No thanks.
Yeah, so is there anything from the list of topics we wanted to touch on?
We haven't. I was looking at. I noticed we didn't talk about any of these.
Literally not one.
No, it's we haven't done one of these in a bit, and it was fun to actually talk about the apocalypse and a bunch of stuff that we normally wouldn't get to. Yeah,
we talked about the apocalypse, politics, and a lot about Korea.
I'm glad I remembered that the Witch movie because that would have gone on. My thoughts on that would have been lost to time until one of you watched it randomly on your own. So
you actually really sold that, and I'm gonna look it up and watch it.
Oh, it's fucking dope! I can't wait. It's so good. Also, a movie that got Oscar nominations and a lot of talk. It's also really good. Is Decision to Leave. It's a Chan Park, his latest movie. I recommend that as well. That movie is. It's a lot. It's also very De Palma-y in many ways.
Was it the Japanese film or was it Korean? The License to Drive, wasn't that the foreign film Oscar winner recently?
That's I think that's 2021.
Oh God, okay. I'm very behind. It was something I was curious about, and I'd heard good things, but I also wasn't sure because I didn't know anybody who had actually seen it.
That movie is that's an interesting movie.
Okay.
That's I'm trying to figure out a way to sum it up very succinctly. It's a lot about grief. Drive My Car is the name of the movie.
That's it. Okay.
It's about
License to Drive
is a Corey Feldman and Corey Haim movie. Yeah.
It's okay, I gotta look up the plot because it's some of the details are escaping me, but I just want to refresh myself really quickly.
Right, I have the wiki up. Oh no, that's a full plot. That's a synopsis.
Yeah, it's a lot. So it's about a playwright and a play director who moves to a smaller town to on loan basically. He's there to do a play and
it's not a smaller town, it's Hiroshima.
Okay, yeah. Well, a different town, not Tokyo is my point. He's out of town. He's going to another place. It's
he's gonna put. I'm looking at it. He's putting on a production of Uncle Vanya.
Yeah, if they did an American remake, he'd be going from New York to San Francisco. I don't know enough about Japanese.
Hiroshima would be more with a military town and you'd be going to Pittsburgh or something.
Sure, Pittsburgh. We'll go with Pittsburgh. He's going to visit you, Eric.
No, I don't. That's 4 hours away from me.
Yeah, that's almost Ohio.
Yeah. Yeah, you don't realize how big Pennsylvania is.
I don't over here in Washington. I don't. I have no clue. It's a completely different world to me. I hear people talk about going from New York to Pennsylvania, and I'm like, what?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's technically that could be an hour and a half, 2 hour drive.
Yeah,
Like,
about 2.5. Well, I mean, it's 4 if you want to get into Center City, Manhattan.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah, if you were
Like-
going from like Staten Island or like to the closest part of Pennsylvania, it would not take long.
No.
Yeah, for me, like the closest I can even get to that is me saying I'm going to drive to Montana today because Idaho has that little narrow panhandle. I can do that, but that is not the normal conversation about driving from one
Oh.
state to another here. It's like, oh, I'm going to California. Oh, so you're going to be gone for 2.5 days. Okay. I'm not going to hear from you for a long time.
And also, like, New York is also gigantic because you could technically be like New York and Pennsylvania touch. So
Yep.
yes, well, going from like the farthest point east of New York to the farthest point west is yeah.
that's similar. That's like a couple day trip.
Yeah. But anyway, we started talking about geography. But no, he's going there and he's staying in town, and while he's there, he has to have a driver. Who's a young woman who professionally drives people back and forth. And it's all about like him getting involved with this community while he's like thinking a lot about his wife back home, and it's just like him and all these other characters that we're introduced to while he's putting on the play. I think he actively makes the choice to cast, I want to say he chooses to cast Koreans in Korean roles.
Yes. I'm looking at
yes.
the wiki and I was like, oh, they're
Yeah.
actually putting Koreans in this Japanese movie.
Yeah, and he's like actively like making some interesting choices with the play and how he's doing it. He casts she's not deaf. I want to say she's
mute. She's mute. I'm looking at the
as one of the characters. And it's just like about these people and how they interact with each other, and it's like, but it's very like slow and thoughtful and meditative. Interesting movie. Yeah, I would highly suggest it if that's the kind of thing that you're looking for, something that is kind of quiet and very thoughtful. And it's a lot about people's internal feelings and the way it comes through in their performances. It's interesting for those reasons. Very much the opposite of a lot of the movies we've talked about today.
Yes, very much so. Very much so. Yeah, I don't know if there's anything else anybody wanted to touch on, or
I'll just say one thing. Connor has been doggedly trying to convince me to watch Picard. He's very serious about this. And maybe we'll see. The things he's been saying are interesting, but
I'm honestly in the same boat because like I like Trek. I think we're both like on that train, and that's the one show I've avoided of the new stuff.
I committed I think in total 15 hours to that show, and at least 9 hours of those 15 hours weren't enjoyable. It's
not terrible.
I mean, it's not. That's you're correct, Eric. That's not terrible. But like, I need Connor to see the finale and tell me the finale was fantastic. It needs to be like all-timer material for me to even begin to start this new season. Because I'll admit, I've only heard good things from people that normally don't like modern Trek. People who are normally very much out on Discovery, and a lot of the other newer stuff that they've been doing seem to really like it. So it's a good sign for me. Because I like modern Trek, but I also acknowledge that it has a lot of flaws. So it could be good. I need it to end, because when I've been hurt this much before, this is the stance that I take. Is like, no, I need you to tell me that it's working out later on for me to get in.
That's my feelings with Game of Thrones, and eventually I'll watch House of Dragons.
See, while I completely understand that, House of the Dragons
different people.
So far, it is very different people, and it's just, it has different stakes to it. I don't know. the things that they would have to do to truly mess it up in the ways that those OG showrunners did, it would have to be so spectacular for me to be like, oh, I'm completely out on this show. The stuff that is more worrying to me is like when they'll make comments that make me think, oh, they took the wrong lessons from the original show. But even that stuff, it's not impacting the actual show I'm seeing. It's just telling me something about the people making it and like their position. But the actual show they're producing is at the very least baseline HBO quality television, and it's a big fantasy show. So it's interesting on that level. But at the same time, I completely understand wanting to wait and not feeling any urgency to get to it, because I am also in the camp of like, I can't believe how badly they messed that up at the end of Game of Thrones. It's I think it will go down in history as like one of the biggest fumbles.
Hey, and there's one of the other key goalposts we always hit in an episode is there's some sort of Game of Thrones mention made.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, but yeah, I guess with that we should wrap it up. We did have plans to talk about other stuff, but you know what? We decided to have some adult-ish talks this evening. Anyways, yeah. I've been your host, Eric Fedorchak. You can find me at Eric_Fedor on Instagram. There's Bishop Talks and Food and Cats and Comics. Flair and Fan Zone, Flair and wherever. Just, I don't know, people. Just rise up, fuck a boss. Find what you want to do with your life that you enjoy and do it. You'll make it work somehow. Or you won't. And then you'll have to go work for a fucking boss and hate your life. Anyways.
Or the world ends.
Yeah, well, that too. You know. But yeah, don't waste all your fucking time thinking it might get better working at a job fucking that you hate. Just
have a good time as we slowly veer into the Black Mirror future where we're all writing
God.
Yeah, God. It's weird when like the Black Mirror futures are like the good futures to me. I'm like,
yeah,
no, that wouldn't actually be all that bad.
Yeah.
That's the halfway reasonable ending. Anyways, my other show, which may or may not get a new name if me and the other Eric decide to do so, we've been on this run of like just watching movies that we haven't gotten around to, like in our personal lives, like big name movies, you know, like pretty seismic important movies. We had a little diversion to the movie Sunshine recently, but movies like Das Boot, which we just recently watched. So look forward to that episode once it's out, and a bunch of other stuff that we've already done. Go listen to that. Go listen to Stalker, among others. And So,
Lou, you got anything?
Nope.
Okay. I wasn't sure. I wasn't sure if you were getting the band back together for the comic show or anything like that. But
we'll see.
Baseball, that's hard. From everything that I know, that would actually be extremely difficult. So yeah.
Fair enough. Yeah. All right. Well, that's been the show, everybody. Good night. Goodbye.
Bye.